So I get asked by people who are getting into the gaming hobby, like for advice, for recommendations, and that kind of stuff is cool. But what's as I've gotten into the hobby more, as I've I guess gotten some self discipline with it, I wanted to share some helpful little hints and tips for anyone who's getting into tabletop gaming, and this can be said for most other hobbies, but this is just my personal 5 things that I personally would like to kind of help people to understand, only just to save some headache and empty wallets later. So take with it as you will. You got any of your own? Feel free to list them down below. So the first one is, don't try and be the guy with the largest collection. See, and I fell into that category. I was like really dead set on buying like all kinds of I was really dead set on buying like all sorts of different games and just like keep adding them to the shelf. And eventually what it did was it just takes up space. And unlike like videos and video games, it's like it's board gaming. It takes up more room. Like what would be, the size of this typically is something roughly about the size of this. So you obviously can't store as much as you would like. So I would say try to narrow down what you want to play and don't necessarily try to hoard and over collect. Now, if you're someone that just happens to have a really big house and a whole room that you can dedicate to it, I guess go for it, live your best life. However, I'd say for everyone else, just one step at a time. Maybe try to do some further research, which leads me into the second thing, which is do some research on your own. Look up some videos, read some reviews, look at some pictures. I often find that a lot of people who just like to go and shop based on what's on the cover of some tabletop games, that's not enough. I don't feel like it does a good enough job because it doesn't show you how the game is played, and it doesn't show how like the inner like mechanics are being played out. And now I'm the kind of person where I kind of need to see it for myself in order to get a feel for it. Now I have seen some really cool looking games, but just there's something about how it plays that I just immediately get turned off from it. Like for example, there was a game that had an underwater theme. I think it was called Oceanos, and aesthetically it looked really cool. I love the visuals. The problem is the game played like a slog. It didn't really fit to mechanics and design that I really felt I would enjoy. Another game that I was kind of into on theme was Cargo Noir, which is basically like I believe you're running your own crime syndicate and you do certain things on the board, but the problem is like it's a very slow, uneventful game, and you're using your wealth to basically determine what you're able to do. But the problem is that it's all in a bidding system, so everything happens really slowly. Now, there are much better control, like Mafia control style games out there. I believe Godfather Corleone's Empire is a really good example. I have not personally played it, but I have heard good things. So, like, a good example is somebody was asking me about Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride's a very streamlined, like, very introduction to board gaming game that I will put on the table and I will show anyone how to play, and they'll usually get it within like a few minutes. And I told them how to play, and after I told them, they looked a quick video up on it and they said, oh, okay, well, that's not for me. That seems like it's not, it seems like it's a slow game. And I'm like, okay, I may not personally agree with them, but at the same time, they're like, oh, this doesn't look like something I would play right now. So I'm going to avoid putting money into it. And I do respect that, you know, having like a mature sense of when and when not to buy things is really good. Another thing, I guess the third thing, as far as advice for getting into the hobby is, don't always follow what the hype train is for gaming. Because I remember for the longest time, like, Wingspan was the hotness. I think, yeah, I got my copy right here. Like, this game right here, this was the hotness. And everyone was going crazy about it. So much so that you couldn't find a copy on Amazon, and if it did come up, it was coming up through a third-party seller, and it was going for almost 50% more than what it initially was. Actually, no, we were going for double. And because of that, the market, like, the copies just dried up, and not everyone could actually play it. And because it wasn't like a mass production game, like, you go into Target and Walmart, you'll see Catan, you know, you'll see Ticket to Ride, you'll see code names, you'll see those games, no problem. Those are mass produced in large number. Games like Wingspan are not, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. So the market, like the physical product dried up fast. People couldn't get their hands on it, but because the demand was so high, everyone was running out to get it. And unfortunately, what ended up happening, and I'm not saying this from personal example, I've seen how it's played. I think the game is actually really, really interesting. I have yet to sit down and actually play it, and I really want to. So when more copies came out, as I believe the following edition was made and they made some expansions, it came out. Not a lot of people were really into it. I think it's because it's one of those games where it was doing something different with theme, because it's based around birds and different areas on your player board that you put birds in their various habitats and so on, and then you score based on a variety of things. And that didn't really resonate with a lot of more casual fans of the hobby, because it was, I'd say, a little more complex and not really to their liking. So like, that kind of hurt it, as well as like big reviewers on YouTube. They were like, it's a good game, but it's fallen off for me. It doesn't have the luster it once did. Like, it's a game that generated a lot of buzz just because, you know, it was hard to find. And then when it finally did come out, it didn't really get the overall praise that it did. Now, I want to go on the record and say it's a beautiful game. It looks like it's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to actually trying it. I was lucky enough to find a copy. Come on, Walmart.com. Which leads me into the next one. When you're looking for games, don't be afraid to look online, especially for Target and Walmart, because you will find stuff on there that you will not find in their stores. I find that a lot. I find out that a lot of people who ask me where to go to get games, I usually tell them, I'm like, well, you know, go to the big two mega stores, the red or blue brand. And unfortunately, the problem is that I'd say Target's supply has gotten better, while Walmart's kind of like tapers on and off. So I try to recommend maybe like a local comic store, or stores I know in general that deal in that kind of thing. And that's like sending the kid into the candy store. And it's really funny when I'm like, yeah, you know, because here where I live, there's a store called Mind Games that deals specifically with tabletop, puzzles, all kinds of like stuff, mainly in those regions, and like small, like collectible stuff. And like, I'll send a new gamer out there, and they'll be like, yeah, I went out there and I spent like $200 on stuff. And so I'm like, I feel bad, but I don't feel bad at the same time. I usually, if I give people that kind of advice, it's because they might be looking for a specific game that they can't find right off the bat. Now, unlike mass market games, like your Monopolies, like your Pictionaries, your Catchphrases, let's see what else is out there. Your mini Monopolies. Codenames, I'd almost say, is a mass market game. Like, basically the stuff that you've seen since you were a child on the shelf, like the 100th iteration of Trivial Pursuit or Monopoly. or Connect Four. That game gets made way too much for a very simple game. Um, like those get printed all the time. Whereas like if someone's, I remember specifically someone asked me, "Hey, I wanted to get Suro, but they couldn't find it," and I told them, "Well, I recommend Barnes and Noble. They usually have it, or I'll recommend another store." And of course, there's always Amazon, but I also like people that want to like see what there is available and get an idea for later. Like, I'm like, hey, if you see something you like, like take a picture of it on your phone or write it down on your note tab and like look it up later on and see if that's something for you. So again, do your research. So yeah, don't be afraid to look outside of the normal like big box store. Just like look around, see what other local stores there is. And then the last bit of advice I want to get into with new collectors, and this is probably something that is going to sound a little weird, but hopefully I can do it proper justice and explain it in a way that makes sense. And that is, this is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to have a good time. Expect yourself to not play as much as you think. I'm not being pessimistic by saying it. I'm being realistic. There is a difference. I cannot tell you, when I had my collection at its original status, how many times I would not be able to get people together to play games. And that crushed me. That reality has to sink in with a lot of these newer people getting in the hobby. I spoke with someone who was just buying up anything and everything they could. And unfortunately, they realized that not everyone has the same schedule as they do. You got people with kids, and those responsibilities come first. You got people who work jobs at varying different hours. That takes precedent. You got people who have plans. That takes precedent. So it's the reality that you're not going to get together every single night and play. You'll be lucky if you get together once a week and play. Thankfully, I have a small group, and we get together. We haven't for the last month or so because one of them went on vacation. We can get together once a week or once every other week. And then there's also a local gathering that just started back up on Tuesday nights. They get together for several hours of just open play. People bring their games. Anyone who wants to sit in and play, do that. So I will say this. Plan for the worst when it comes to making plans. Make plans. Just expect that you're not going to be playing every night or every other night. Again, this ties back to rule number one or step number one, tip number one, whatever. Do some research. See if you got any local get-togethers or maybe one in a neighboring town or small area next to you. I often find through Facebook, you'd be surprised what you can find. Or put, ask if there are people who live locally to you in the various, again, similar hobby groups that live close by if they want to get together. And I think that's the biggest part of the hobby that we all need to kind of come to terms with, and that is that we're not going to get together as much and play as much as we do. And I feel like with the people who really hoard everything, that'll hit them. They'll look at their games and they're like, what's the point? And it'll discourage them. But so try to come into that a little bit on your own naturally. There is some maturity and some discipline on there. It's just like going out and buying a video game if you're a collector. It's so simple. But unfortunately, games don't play like that. Video games you can sit down and play whenever you want, whenever you have free time. Board games are a little different. Unless they have a solo variant. So yeah, I guess those are my 5 tips as far as anyone getting into the hobby. I definitely need to do an update video to show what my collection I do have, because I actually sold off a pretty good portion of it, and I'm pretty happy with what I have now. Granted, there's still stuff I want, but I gotta pace myself. So yeah. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully, those who are in the hobby or interested in the hobby, they don't get deterred by what I said. It's not meant to push you away. If anything, I'm just, I'm pulling you in for the ride, but I'm also trying to give you the info that I would not given early on. So that way, when you do play, you're like, okay, well, I got this now. Probably won't play for a couple weeks, but I'm definitely going to play in the near future. Or when they go to the game store, it's like, I don't need to get $300 worth of stuff because you're probably not going to be playing it anytime soon. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Slept on and off all night. Good times. Anyway, to work.